The emperor's ambition. The tent canvas flutters in the cool night air, and by the light of a single oil lamp, a young emperor stares at the map spread before him. The shadows dance across the parchment, revealing kingdoms, rivers, and the vast expanse of territory that bears his name. This is Ashoka, third ruler of the Mauryan Empire, and tonight, in the year 262 BCE, his mind churns with ambition. Perhaps you know what it feels like. That restless energy when a vision consumes you entirely. When sleep becomes secondary to the weight of what you're building. Ashoka understood this feeling intimately. At 28, he had inherited an empire that stretched from the Hindu Kush mountains to the Bay of Bengal, yet still it was not enough. The lamp flickers, casting his shadow long against the tent wall. Outside, the sounds of his vast military camp settle into the quiet rhythms of night. 100,000 soldiers, 10,000 cavalry, 9,000 war elephants, all waiting for dawn, all waiting for his command to march toward Kalinga. Kalinga, the name itself seemed to whisper of resistance. This independent kingdom along the eastern coast had remained unconquered, a stubborn thorn in the side of Mauryan dominance. Its people were known for their fierce independence, their skilled warriors, their refusal to bow to any foreign power. They controlled the vital trade routes to the south, commanded respect from neighboring kingdoms, and their very existence seemed to mock Ashoka's claim to universal rule. The young emperor traces the coastline with his finger, following the borders of this defiant land. In his mind, he can see it clearly. Kalinga absorbed into his empire, its ports flying Mauryan banners, its wealth flowing into his treasury, its warriors serving under his command. It would complete the eastern expansion, secure the trade routes, and prove once and for all that the Mauryan Empire was truly supreme. But tonight, something feels different. As Ashoka stares at that map, a strange unease settles in his chest. Perhaps it's the weight of command, or perhaps it's something deeper, something his ambitious mind cannot yet name. The oil in the lamp burns lower, and in the growing darkness, the borders between kingdoms seem to blur and shift. Tomorrow, the march begins. Tomorrow, the greatest military campaign of his reign will commence. Tomorrow, Ashoka will set in motion events that will change not only his empire, but the very core of who he is as a man. The tent flap stirs again, and for a moment the emperor looks up from his maps toward the star-filled sky, as if sensing that this night marks the end of one chapter of his life and the beginning of something he cannot yet imagine. The march to Kalinga. Dawn breaks over the Mauryan camp with the sound of 10,000 awakening warriors. The great war elephants trumpet their morning calls, their massive forms silhouetted against the rose-colored sky. This is no ordinary army preparing to march. This is the most formidable military force the ancient world has ever assembled. Picture, if you will, the sheer scale of this undertaking. 100,000-foot soldiers, their bronze-tipped spears catching the early light. 10,000 cavalry, their horses stamping and snorting in the cool morning air. And those magnificent war elephants, 9,000 of them, each one a living fortress, each one capable of crushing enemy lines like wheat before the harvest. The logistics alone would stagger a modern mind. Supply trains stretching for miles, carrying grain, weapons, siege equipment, and the thousand necessities of war. Engineers with their scaling ladders and battering rams. Physicians with their herbs and surgical tools. Scribes to record the victories that surely lay ahead. Ashoka rides at the head of this vast procession, mounted on his royal elephant, Suparatika. From this height, he can see the full extent of his power stretching behind him. A river of bronze and leather and determined faces, all flowing toward one destination. The dust they raise can be seen for miles, announcing to every village and town that the emperor himself is on the march. The journey to Kalinga takes them through the heart of the empire, past fields where farmers pause in their work to watch the army pass, through forests where the very trees seem to bend away from the thunder of so many feet, across rivers that run muddy for hours after the elephants have forded them. As they travel, stories reach them of their destination. Kalinga, they say, is a land of green hills and fertile valleys. Its capital, Tosali, sits like a jewel beside the sea, its white walls reflecting the morning sun. The Kalingan people are described as proud and prosperous, skilled in trade, devoted to their independence, and utterly determined to resist any invasion. But resistance, Ashoka believes, is futile against such overwhelming force. His generals speak confidently of a swift campaign, perhaps a few months at most. The Kalingans, they reason, will see the size of the Mauryan army and surrender rather than face certain destruction. How wrong they would prove to be. The Kalingan scouts watch from hidden positions as the Mauryan army approaches their borders. They count the elephants, estimate the numbers, and ride swiftly back to their king with reports that chill the blood. Never has such a force been assembled against their homeland. Yet in the council chambers of Tosali, the response is unanimous. Kalinga will fight. The land itself seems to prepare for war. The monsoon season has ended, leaving the fields golden and ready for harvest. But instead of grain, these fields will soon yield a different crop entirely. The rivers run clear and peaceful, not yet knowing they will soon run red. The coastal winds carry the salt scent of the sea, mingling with the smoke from village hearths where families gather for what may be their last peaceful meals. In the markets of Kalinga, merchants sell their wares as they have for generations. Fine textiles, precious stones, spices from distant lands. Children play in the streets, their laughter echoing off the walls of homes that have sheltered families for centuries. Fishermen mend their nets by the harbour, planning tomorrow's catch as if tomorrow will be just another ordinary day. But the horizon darkens with more than storm clouds. The great Mauryan army approaches like a slow-moving tempest, inexorable and devastating. Village by village, the people of Kalinga receive the news. The emperor comes with fire and sword, demanding submission or promising destruction. And village by village, the answer is the same: Kalinga will not kneel. The stage is set for a conflict that will reshape not just the political map of ancient India, but the very soul of the man who ordered it. As Ashoka's army finally crosses into Kalingan territory, the die is cast. The Kalinga War, one of the bloodiest campaigns in ancient history, is about to begin. Neither side yet understands the true cost of what they have chosen. Neither the emperor nor his enemies can imagine how this war will end, not in triumph, but in transformation, not in conquest, but in an awakening that will echo through the centuries. The march to Kalinga is nearly complete. The reckoning is about to begin. The cost of war. The morning after the first great battle, a silence hangs over the Kalingan countryside that is deeper than any natural quiet. It is the silence of a world forever changed, where the very air seems to hold its breath in the face of such devastation. Imagine walking through these fields at dawn. Your feet would find no clear path, for the earth is churned into mud by the passage of armies, by the fall of so many bodies, by blood that has soaked deep into soil that once grew rice and millet. The sweet scent of jasmine and frangipani, so characteristic of this coastal land, now mingles with smoke and something far more terrible. In the village of Dantapura, an old woman named Kamala sits beside what remains of her home. Half the roof has been torn away by a war elephant's tusks, and the walls bear the scars of bronze-tipped spears. But Kamala herself sits straight-backed, her weathered hands busy with their familiar task. She is weaving, as she has done every morning for 60 years, as if the simple act of creating something beautiful might hold back the chaos that has engulfed her world. Her grandson, barely 12 summers old, lies on a mat beside her. A Mauryan arrow found him as he tried to drive their cattle to safety, and now fever burns in his small body while she weaves and watches and prays to gods who seem to have turned their faces away from Kalinga. "Tell me the story again, grandmother," the boy whispers, his voice barely audible above the distant sounds of war. And so Kamala tells him, as she has told 3 generations before him, the ancient tales of their people, how Kalinga was founded by heroes who chose freedom over comfort, independence over easy submission, how their ancestors built these cities stone by stone, carved these temples with their own hands, established trade routes that brought prosperity to countless families. But even as she speaks, the sounds of the present intrude. The rumble of supply wagons carrying away Kalingan grain to feed Mauryan soldiers. The weeping of women who search among the dead for husbands and sons. The harsh commands of foreign officers who now patrol streets where children once played freely. 3 villages away, in what was once the prosperous town of Sisupalgar, A young mother named Sundari clutches her infant daughter to her chest. Their house still stands, but her husband does not. He fell defending the town's gates, his body now lying somewhere in a mass grave with hundreds of other Kalingan warriors who chose death over surrender. Sundari has no time for grief, though it sits like a stone in her chest. The baby needs milk, and her own body, weakened by fear and poor food, struggles to provide it. Around her, other women face the same desperate calculations. How to keep children alive when the granaries have been seized, when the wells are fouled with ash, when every day brings new rumors of approaching battles. Yet watch these women closely and you will see something remarkable. In the midst of devastation, they organize. They share what little they have. They tend each other's children when illness strikes. They gather herbs for medicine, hide grain for the hungry, and somehow maintain the fragile threads that hold their community together. In the coastal village of Puri, old fishermen who have never held weapons take up arms beside teenage boys who should be learning trades, not warfare. They know they cannot defeat the Mauryan war machine, but they fight anyway. Not for victory, which seems impossible, but for something deeper, for the right to remain who they are, to speak their own language, to worship at their own temples, to live and die as free people. The Mauryan soldiers, many of them far from their own homes, begin to understand that this is not the quick campaign their generals promised. Every village must be taken by force. Every hill must be climbed under a rain of arrows. Every river crossing becomes a battle. The Kalingan people fight with the desperate courage of those who have nothing left to lose. And in his command tent, reviewing the daily reports, Ashoka begins to see numbers that trouble his sleep. Not just the enemy casualties, which mount steadily, but his own losses. Brave soldiers from Punjab and Magadha, men who followed him faithfully, now lie buried in Kalingan soil. Elephants that took years to train lie fallen beside the warriors they carried. The swift victory he envisioned stretches into weeks, then months of grinding warfare. But the emperor does not yet understand the true cost of what he has unleashed. He sees the tactical challenges, the logistical problems, the political implications. What he has not yet grasped is how deeply this war is cutting into something more precious than territory or treasure. It is cutting into the very heart of human dignity, into the bonds that hold civilization together, into his own soul. The Kalinga War rages on, and with each passing day, the price grows higher. Not just in gold or land or strategic advantage, but in something far more fundamental. In the trust between ruler and ruled, in the belief that power should protect rather than destroy, in the hope that tomorrow might be better than today. The cost of war, Ashoka is beginning to learn, cannot be measured only in the currencies of conquest. Hack, healing and compassion. In the ruins of what was once a thriving marketplace in Bhubaneswar, something remarkable begins to unfold. As the sounds of battle fade into the distance, moving toward other unfortunate towns, the work of healing quietly commences. An elderly woman named Yashodhara emerges from the temple where she and others have taken shelter. Her white sari is stained with dust and worse, but her eyes hold a determination that war has not dimmed. She is a healer, trained in the ancient arts of Ayurveda, and she carries with her a leather satchel filled with herbs, oils, and the accumulated wisdom of a lifetime spent easing suffering. Behind her come others, women mostly, but some men too, all united by a simple understanding that transcends the politics of war. The wounded need tending, regardless of which banner they served under. The hungry need feeding, whether they are Kalingan or Mauryan. Pain, they know, recognizes no borders. Yashodhara kneels beside a young Mauryan soldier who lies groaning beneath a collapsed stall. His leg is badly broken, and infection has begun to set in. By all the logic of war, this boy is her enemy. His comrades have destroyed her city, killed her neighbors, shattered the peace she has known all her life. Yet as she looks at his fever-bright eyes, she sees only what she has always seen, a human being in need of healing. "Bring me clean water," she calls softly to her helpers, "and the neem leaves from my bag. This wound must be cleaned before the poison spreads further." Her hands, gnarled with age but still steady, work with practiced efficiency. She cleans the wound with water boiled with turmeric, applies a poultice of herbs to draw out infection, and sets the broken bone with splints carved from bamboo. The young soldier, delirious with fever, calls out for his mother in a dialect from distant Magadha. "Shh," Yashodhara murmurs, placing a cool cloth on his burning forehead. "Rest now, the pain will pass." Across the makeshift hospital they have created in the temple courtyard, similar scenes unfold. A Kalingan woman tends to wounds on a Mauryan officer's back. A young priest, barely out of his novitiate, holds water to the lips of a dying enemy soldier. Children, their own homes destroyed, bring flowers to place beside the wounded, as if beauty itself might be a medicine. This is not organized by any authority, commanded by any king, or rewarded by any treasury. This compassion springs from something deeper, something that war cannot touch. It rises from the understanding that suffering is suffering, that pain recognizes no nationality, that mercy is not a weakness, but perhaps the highest expression of human strength. In another part of the city, a group of women has organized a kitchen in the ruins of what was once a grain merchant's warehouse. They work with whatever they can find: rice salvaged from damaged stores, vegetables from abandoned gardens, milk from cows that wander ownerless through the streets. The food they prepare feeds anyone who comes, asking no questions about loyalty or allegiance. Mira, who lost her husband in the siege, stirs a large pot with one hand while balancing her infant son on her hip. "There is enough for everyone," she says, when others worry about their meager supplies. "There must be enough. What else do we have left but our ability to care for one another?" Even among the Mauryan troops, compassion begins to stir. Soldiers who expected to be met with hatred and resistance find themselves recipients of unexpected kindness. A cavalry officer, wounded in a skirmish, tells his comrades of the Kalingan family who sheltered him, sharing their own meager food and tending his injuries, though they had every reason to let him die. "They asked nothing of me," he says, his voice filled with wonder. "No information about our movements, no pledge of protection for their village. They simply saw that I was hurt and helped me. I have never encountered such pure kindness." These stories spread through the camps and villages like seeds on the wind. Tales of enemies who became healers, of strangers who became family, of moments when the artificial divisions of war dissolved in the face of genuine human connection. They are small stories, perhaps, in the grand sweep of imperial conquest, but they carry within them the power to transform hearts. In her simple hut on the outskirts of Cuttack, another healer named Shanti tends to a steady stream of the wounded. Her supplies are nearly exhausted, her own strength worn thin by weeks of constant labor, yet still they come. Mauryan and Kalingan, soldier and civilian, young and old, all seeking the healing touch of hands guided by compassion rather than politics. As she works, Shanti often thinks of the teachings she learned as a young woman, that all life is sacred, that every being deserves dignity, that the highest calling of any person is to ease the suffering of others. War may rage around her, empires may rise and fall, but these truths remain constant, like stars that shine through even the darkest nights. The healing continues, one person at a time, one act of kindness at a time. It cannot stop the war, cannot bring back the dead, cannot undo the terrible damage that has been done. But it does something perhaps more important. It keeps alive the possibility that humans can choose compassion over cruelty, mercy over revenge, love over hatred. And somewhere in his royal tent, as reports reach him of these acts of healing, Emperor Ashoka begins to feel the first stirrings of something he has never experienced before, a deep, uncomfortable questioning of everything he thought he knew about power, about conquest, about what it truly means to rule. The turning point. The morning sun rises blood-red over the battlefield of Dhauli, and Emperor Ashoka stands alone on a small hill overlooking the carnage. Below him stretches a sight that will haunt him for the rest of his days. The Daya River, which once ran clear and sweet, now flows crimson with the blood of over 100,000 fallen warriors. This is victory, by every measure his generals use. The Kalingan army has been crushed, their king captured, their capital city open to Mauryan occupation. The eastern coast now belongs to his empire, the trade routes are secured, and the last independent kingdom has finally bowed to Mauryan supremacy. By the logic of conquest, this should be Ashoka's greatest triumph. Yet as the emperor surveys the field of his victory, something breaks inside him. Something that all his years of military training, all his inherited beliefs about power and dominance, have never prepared him to face. The silence is overwhelming. Not the peaceful quiet of dawn, but the terrible absence of voices that will never speak again. He dismounts from his elephant and walks among the fallen. Here lies a young Kalingan warrior, barely old enough to grow a beard, his hand still clutching a wooden shield painted with the image of his family's deity. There, a Mauryan soldier from his own guard, a man who had served faithfully for 15 years, whose children Ashoka knew by name. The emperor kneels beside this fallen soldier, his hands trembling as he closes the man's lifeless eyes. "Forgive me," he whispers, though whether he speaks to the dead man, to the gods, or to his own conscience, he cannot say. As Ashoka continues his walk through the aftermath, he begins to see details that his earlier battle reports had reduced to mere numbers. A Kalingan mother who died shielding her infant son, both of them now still beneath a torn banner. An elderly priest, his white robe stained with blood, who had apparently been trying to tend the wounded when a spear found him. Each body tells a story. Each death represents not just a military statistic, but a universe of relationships severed, dreams unfulfilled, love cut short. The scope of the destruction begins to overwhelm him. These are not abstract enemies defeated in service of imperial glory. These are people. People who had names, families, hopes, fears, just like his own subjects, just like himself. A movement catches his eye, and he sees a young girl, perhaps 8 years old, sitting beside the body of a Kalingan warrior. She is not weeping, not calling out. She simply sits in silence, holding the dead man's hand. Her father, perhaps, or an older brother. Ashoka approaches slowly, his heart constricting in his chest. "Child," he says gently, "you should not be here. This place is not safe." She looks up at him with eyes that seem far too old for her face. "Where else should I be?" she asks with heartbreaking simplicity. "This is all I have left." The emperor, who has commanded armies and ruled millions, finds himself speechless before this small girl's devastating honesty. In her words, he hears the voice of every orphan his war has created, every widow, every parent who will never again hold their child. That night, alone in his tent, Ashoka cannot eat, cannot sleep, cannot focus on the administrative tasks of occupation that await his attention. The image of that little girl haunts him, but she is joined by 1,000 other faces. The healer he saw tending to wounded enemies, the mother who died protecting her child, the young soldiers on both sides who will never see home again. For the first time in his life, the emperor finds himself questioning the very foundations of his existence. What is the purpose of power if it brings such suffering? What value is there in conquest if it requires the destruction of so much that is precious? What kind of king orders such devastation in the name of glory? He thinks of his grandfather, Chandragupta, who founded the Mauryan Empire through warfare and political cunning. He thinks of his father, Bindusara, who expanded that empire and taught young Ashoka that strength was the only currency that mattered in the world of kings. All his life, he has been taught that this is the natural order. The strong conquer the weak, empires grow through force, and a ruler's greatness is measured by the extent of his dominions. But sitting in his tent, surrounded by the sounds of an army celebrating victory, Ashoka feels only emptiness. The taste of conquest has turned to ash in his mouth. The cheers of his soldiers sound hollow. The reports of captured treasure and subjugated cities bring him no joy. A profound transformation is beginning, though he does not yet have words for what he is experiencing. The man who entered Kalinga as a conqueror is being reborn as something else entirely. The emperor who believed that power came from the sword is discovering that there might be another kind of strength altogether. Outside his tent, the dire river continues to flow toward the sea, carrying with it the blood of this terrible day. But it also carries something else, the possibility of redemption, the hope that even the deepest wounds might someday heal, the promise that from the darkest moments of human experience, wisdom and compassion might yet emerge. Ashoka does not sleep that night. Instead, he sits in the darkness, wrestling with questions that will reshape not only his own life, but the destiny of his entire empire. The turning point has come, though its full implications will take time to unfold. The conqueror is about to become something the world has never seen before, a king who chooses compassion over conquest, mercy over might, dharma over dominion, embracing dharma. 3 months after the Battle of Dhauli, Emperor Ashoka sits beneath an ancient banyan tree in the forest monastery of Kukutarama. The man who once commanded the largest army in the ancient world now listens in silence to the gentle words of a Buddhist monk named Upagupta. The transformation did not happen overnight. In the weeks following his victory in Kalinga, Ashoka found himself unable to return to the routines of imperial administration. The weight of what he had done pressed upon him like a physical burden. Sleep brought nightmares of the battlefield. Meals turned to dust in his mouth. The very sight of his war elephants filled him with revulsion. His counselors worried, his generals whispered among themselves. The emperor, they said, had been changed by the war in ways they could not understand. Some suggested it was merely the exhaustion of a long campaign. Others feared for his sanity. None of them grasped that they were witnessing something unprecedented in the annals of kingship, the birth of a ruler's conscience. It was in this state of spiritual crisis that Ashoka first encountered the teachings of the Buddha, not through grand theological debates or formal court presentations, but through the simple actions of those Buddhist monks and laypeople who had come to Kalinga to tend the wounded and comfort the grieving. "Your Majesty," Upagupta says now, his voice as calm as still water, "you speak of the suffering you have caused, and this awareness is the beginning of wisdom. But tell me, what is the nature of this suffering you feel?" Ashoka struggles to find words for the turmoil in his heart. "I see their faces, Venerable One, the dead, the wounded, the orphaned. I hear their cries in my sleep. I have won an empire, but I feel as though I have lost my soul." The monk nods with infinite compassion. "This pain you feel, this remorse, it is not your enemy, Your Majesty. It is your teacher. It arises from the recognition that all beings, regardless of their kingdom or their station, share the same fundamental nature. All seek happiness. All wish to avoid suffering. All are worthy of compassion." Over the course of many such conversations, Ashoka begins to understand the concept of dharma, not as a set of religious rules, but as a way of living that recognizes the interconnectedness of all life. Dharma, Upagupta explains, is the natural law that governs not just human behavior, but the very fabric of existence. It is the understanding that our actions have consequences, not just for ourselves, but for all beings. A king's dharma, the monk continues, is not to conquer and subdue, but to protect and nurture. Your power, Your Majesty, is not given to you for your own glory, but as a trust, a responsibility to ensure the welfare of all who depend upon your rule. These words strike Ashoka like lightning. All his life, he has been taught that kingship was about dominance, about imposing his will upon others. Now he begins to see it differently, as an opportunity to serve, to heal, to create conditions where all beings might flourish. The emperor begins to study the Buddhist teachings with the same intensity he once brought to military strategy. He learns about the Four Noble Truths, which explain the nature of suffering and the path to its cessation. He contemplates the Eightfold Path, with its emphasis on right action, right speech, and right livelihood. Most profoundly, he begins to understand the principle of ahimsa, non-violence toward all living beings. But how, he asks Upagupta one day, can a king rule without violence? How can an empire be maintained without the threat of force? The monk smiles gently. "Your Majesty, true strength lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the power to create. Not in the capacity to instill fear, but in the skill to inspire love. A ruler who governs through dharma needs no army to enforce his will, for his subjects follow him willingly, knowing that he seeks their welfare above his own." Gradually, Ashoka begins to see a new vision for his empire. Instead of a realm held together by conquest and maintained by fear, he imagines a society based on mutual respect, compassion, and the recognition of universal human dignity. Instead of measuring his success by the extent of his territories, he begins to dream of measuring it by the happiness and well-being of his people. The transformation is not merely intellectual. Ashoka begins to change his daily practices, his personal habits, his very way of being in the world. He adopts a vegetarian diet, refusing to take life for his sustenance. He reduces the elaborate ceremonies and luxuries of court life, choosing simplicity over ostentation. He begins each day with meditation, seeking to cultivate the inner peace that must precede any attempt to create peace in the world. Most importantly, he begins to formulate a new approach to governance, one based not on the traditional tools of royal power, but on the principles of dharma he is learning. Laws will be written not to punish and control, but to guide and protect. Officials will be chosen not for their loyalty to the throne, but for their commitment to justice. The resources of the empire will be directed not toward further conquest, but toward the welfare of the people. This path you describe, Ashoka says to Upagupta during one of their final conversations, it will not be easy. Many will not understand. Some will see compassion as weakness, mercy as folly. Indeed, Your Majesty, the monk replies. But consider this. The path of conquest led to Kalinga and to the suffering that now troubles your heart. Perhaps it is time to try a different way. Perhaps it is time to discover what an empire built on love rather than fear might become. As Ashoka prepares to leave the monastery and return to his capital, he carries with him more than new knowledge. He carries a new identity, a new purpose, a new understanding of what it means to be a king. The emperor who entered this forest grove was a conqueror. The man who emerges is something history has never seen before. A ruler dedicated to the welfare of all beings. A king whose greatest victories will be won not on battlefields, but in the hearts of his people. The age of Dharma is about to begin. Building a new empire. The great hall of Pataliputra has never seen a scene quite like this. Emperor Ashoka sits not on his golden throne, but on a simple wooden chair, surrounded not by armed guards and court officials, but by a diverse gathering of monks, scholars, merchants, farmers, and artisans. Today, he is announcing the most radical transformation in governance the ancient world has ever witnessed. My friends, he begins, his voice carrying a warmth that would have been unthinkable in the old days of imperial majesty. I have called you here not as subjects to receive commands, but as partners in building something new. We are going to remake this empire, not through conquest, but through compassion, not through fear, but through dharma. The assembled crowd listens in amazement as their emperor outlines his vision. Gone will be the harsh punishments that have long characterized Mauryan justice. In their place will come laws designed to protect the vulnerable, support the needy, and encourage moral behavior. Gone will be the emphasis on military expansion. Instead, the empire's resources will be devoted to the welfare of its people. Ashoka's first great initiative is the establishment of a new class of officials called the Dharma-Mahamatras. These are not tax collectors or military commanders, but ministers of welfare whose sole responsibility is to ensure that Dharma is practiced throughout the empire. They are chosen not for their political connections or administrative efficiency, but for their compassion, wisdom, and commitment to justice. Go among the people, Ashoka instructs these new officials. Learn their needs, understand their struggles, and work to ease their suffering. You are not rulers over them, but servants to them. Your success will be measured not by the tribute you collect, but by the happiness you create. The transformation begins immediately and touches every aspect of imperial administration. Courts that once focused primarily on punishment now emphasize rehabilitation and reconciliation. Judges are instructed to consider not just the letter of the law, but its spirit, to ask not only what crime was committed, but how can we heal the harm that has been done. Prisons, those dark places where criminals once languished in chains, are reformed according to dharmic principles. Inmates are provided with education, job training, and spiritual guidance. The goal is no longer simply to punish wrongdoing, but to transform wrongdoers into productive members of society. In the markets and trading centers of the empire, new regulations ensure fair dealing and honest commerce. Weights and measures are standardized to prevent cheating. Price controls protect consumers from exploitation. Special courts are established to resolve commercial disputes quickly and fairly. But perhaps most revolutionary of all is Ashoka's approach to religious diversity. Rather than promoting Buddhism as the official religion of the empire, he proclaims tolerance and respect for all faiths. Hindu temples, Jain monasteries, and Buddhist stupas all receive imperial support. Religious festivals of every tradition are celebrated with equal enthusiasm. All religions, Ashoka declares, teach the same essential truths: compassion, honesty, kindness, and respect for life. A truly dharmic empire must honor these teachings wherever they are found. The emperor's commitment to non-violence extends far beyond human relationships. Imperial hunts, once grand displays of royal power, are abolished. The vast royal menageries, where exotic animals were kept for the amusement of the court, are transformed into sanctuaries where creatures can live in peace. Ashoka himself adopts a strictly vegetarian diet and encourages others to reduce their consumption of meat. Every being, he explains, has the same fundamental right to life that we claim for ourselves. How can we speak of Dharma while we continue to cause unnecessary suffering to our fellow creatures? The practical results of these policies begin to appear remarkably quickly. Crime rates drop as people find legitimate ways to meet their needs. Trade flourishes as merchants learn they can trust imperial weights, measures, and currency. Religious tensions ease as communities discover they can practice their faiths freely without fear of persecution. Most importantly, the people of the empire begin to see their government not as a distant, threatening force, but as a source of support and protection. When drought threatens crops, imperial granaries open to feed the hungry. When floods destroy villages, imperial engineers arrive to help with reconstruction. When epidemics spread disease, imperial physicians provide free treatment to all who need it. The transformation is not without its challenges. Some of the old guard nobles grumble about the emperor's softness. Neighboring kingdoms wonder if the Mauryan military has lost its edge. A few provincial governors struggle to implement policies so different from everything they have known. But Ashoka remains steadfast in his commitment to dharmic rule. He meets with critics personally, listening to their concerns and explaining his vision. He travels throughout the empire, not in grand processions designed to display power, but in simple journeys meant to understand his people's needs. This is not weakness, he tells a gathering of military commanders who worry about the empire's defenses. This is a different kind of strength. The strength that comes from the willing loyalty of a people who know their ruler truly cares for their welfare. As the months pass, reports begin to reach the capital from across the empire. Villages that had been torn by conflict now live in harmony. Trade routes that had been plagued by bandits now see peaceful commerce. Regions that had chafed under imperial rule now send delegations expressing their gratitude and loyalty. The new empire Ashoka is building may not inspire fear in its enemies, but it is beginning to inspire something far more powerful: love, respect, and genuine devotion from its own people. The age of Dharma is truly beginning, and its effects will ripple across centuries. Hack. The Edicts of Ashoka. On a hillside near the ancient city of Girnar, stonemasons work with meticulous care under the morning sun. Their chisels ring against polished sandstone as they carve characters in the Brahmi script, each letter formed with the precision that befits an imperial decree. But these are no ordinary royal proclamations. These are the Edicts of Ashoka, and they will carry a message unlike any ever issued by a king. The emperor himself stands watching the work, his weathered hands tracing the words as they emerge from the stone. "All men are my children," reads one passage. "Just as I desire for my children that they should live happily and without suffering in this world and attain heaven in the next, so do I desire for all men." This is revolutionary language in an age when kings typically spoke of subjects as property, of conquered peoples as resources to be exploited. Ashoka is proclaiming something unprecedented, that a ruler's relationship to his people should be that of a loving father to his children, protective, nurturing, and unconditionally devoted to their welfare. The edicts are being carved simultaneously on rocks and pillars throughout the empire, from the mountains of Afghanistan to the forests of Karnataka, from the deserts of Rajasthan to the coasts of Odisha. Each inscription is crafted in the local language, ensuring that Ashoka's message of Dharma can be understood by every person in his vast realm. "Why do you think it is important?" asks Upagupta, who has come to witness this historic moment, "to carve these words in stone?" Ashoka considers the question carefully. "Because, Venerable One, human memory is fragile. Rulers come and go, policies change with each succession, and the lessons learned through suffering are easily forgotten. But stone endures. These words will speak to generations yet unborn, reminding them that there was once a king who chose compassion over conquest. The content of the edicts reflects the depth of Ashoka's transformation. He speaks openly of his remorse over the Kalinga War, acknowledging the suffering he caused and declaring that such violence will never again be employed in his name. He outlines the principles of dharma: truthfulness, compassion, generosity, purity, gentleness, and goodness, and explains how these virtues should guide both individual behavior and state policy. One edict addresses religious tolerance with remarkable clarity. All religions should reside everywhere, for all of them desire self-control and purity of heart. But people have various desires and various passions, and they may practice all of what they should or only a part of it. Another focuses on the treatment of servants and employees. There is no better work than promoting the welfare of all the people, and whatever efforts I am making is to repay the debt I owe to all beings, to assure the happiness of all people in this life and attain heaven in the next. The language is direct, personal, and surprisingly humble for imperial pronouncements. Ashoka does not present himself as a divine ruler or an infallible authority. Instead, he acknowledges his own imperfections and presents Dharma not as his personal invention, but as a universal principle that he, like all people, must strive to follow. As word of the edicts spreads throughout the empire, their impact is immediate and profound. In village squares and market towns, people gather to hear the inscriptions read aloud. Many are astonished to learn that their emperor, the most powerful man in their world, speaks to them with such humility and genuine concern. A merchant in Taxila writes to his brother, "I have seen the great pillar the emperor has erected here, and I confess I wept to read his words. Never have I heard a king speak so tenderly of his people's welfare or admit so honestly to his own mistakes." A village headman in Tamil Nadu reports to the provincial governor, "The people are much moved by His Majesty's edict. They speak of little else in the evenings, discussing how they might better follow Dharma in their daily lives. But the edicts do more than inspire. They also provide practical guidance for living according to dharmic principles. They encourage people to be generous to friends and harsh to enemies. No, generous to friends and generous to enemies alike. They promote not just tolerance of different religious beliefs, but active respect and support for all sincere spiritual seeking." The edicts also establish Ashoka's legacy in ways he perhaps did not fully anticipate. By acknowledging his transformation from a conqueror to a servant of Dharma, he creates a template for moral leadership that will inspire rulers for centuries to come. By admitting his mistakes and demonstrating genuine remorse, he shows that true strength lies not in never falling, but in rising with wisdom from one's failures. Perhaps most remarkably, the edicts reveal a king who understands that his greatest victories will not be measured in territory conquered or enemies defeated, but in lives improved and suffering alleviated. "There is no satisfaction for me," one edict declares, "except that of exerting myself and dispatching business. For the welfare of all people is what I must work for, and the root of that, again, is in exertion and dispatch of business." As the sun sets over the hillside at Girnar, the stonemasons complete their work. The words are now permanent, carved deep into stone that will outlast empires and dynasties. But more than that, they are carved into the consciousness of a civilization, establishing principles of governance and personal conduct that will echo through the millennia. The edicts of Ashoka stand as humanity's first great declaration of universal human rights, religious tolerance, and governmental responsibility for citizen welfare. They mark the moment when a king chose to be remembered not for what he conquered, but for what he gave, not for the fear he inspired, but for the love he demonstrated. The message is complete. The transformation is made permanent. The legacy of Dharma is now literally set in stone. Providing for the people. In the village of Sarnath, where the Buddha first taught after his enlightenment, a remarkable sight greets the morning sun. Teams of workers, their backs bent with effort, but their faces bright with purpose, are digging a well. Not just any well, but one of hundreds being constructed across the empire at Emperor Ashoka's command. The village elder, a man named Gautama, whose weathered hands speak of decades working the soil, watches in wonder as the workers descend deeper into the earth. For 60 years, the people of this village have walked nearly 2 miles each morning to fetch water from the nearest reliable source. Now, through the emperor's dharmic vision, clean water will flow just steps from their homes. In all my years, Gautama murmurs to his grandson, I have never seen a king concern himself with such simple needs. Wells and roads, hospitals and rest houses, these are not the works of conquest, but of compassion. The well-digging project is just one facet of Ashoka's comprehensive program to improve the daily lives of his people. Across the empire, teams of engineers and workers are creating an infrastructure of care that touches every community. The emperor has declared that Dharma is not merely a philosophy to be contemplated, but a practice to be lived. And that practice begins with ensuring that every person has access to life's basic necessities. Along the great highways that connect the far reaches of the empire, rest houses are being constructed at regular intervals. These are not grand palaces for the wealthy, but simple, sturdy buildings where any traveler, merchant or pilgrim, rich or poor, can find shelter for the night. Each rest house is staffed with attendants whose job is not to collect fees, but to ensure that guests are comfortable and well fed. Kavi, a traveling merchant from Kashmir, stops at one such rest house on the road to Mathura. He has made this journey many times over the years, usually sleeping under the stars or paying high prices for poor accommodations in roadside inns. Now he finds himself in a clean, comfortable room, served a simple but nourishing meal, and asked for nothing in return except that he treat his fellow travelers with kindness. The emperor asks no payment for this hospitality, explains the rest housekeeper, an elderly woman whose gentle manner reflects the dharmic principles she serves. His Majesty believes that a ruler's duty is to care for his people as a parent cares for children. Your comfort and safety on this journey are his gift to you. The road itself has been improved as well. Potholes filled, dangerous curves straightened, bridges built over streams that once forced travelers to risk dangerous fords. Along the roadside, mango trees and banyan trees are being planted to provide shade for future generations of travelers. Even the mile markers have been redesigned, carved with messages of Dharma alongside the practical information about distances. In the cities, Ashoka's commitment to public welfare takes on even grander dimensions. New hospitals are being constructed, staffed not only with human physicians, but with veterinarians to care for animals. The emperor's understanding of Dharma extends to all living beings, and he believes that a truly compassionate society must tend to the suffering of every creature. Dr. Karaka, the chief physician at the new hospital in Pataliputra, marvels at the resources being devoted to medical care. Never before have I seen such support for the healing arts, he tells his students. The emperor has decreed that no one should suffer from illness due to poverty. Rich and poor, high-born and low, all receive the same quality of care. The hospital gardens are filled with medicinal plants from across the empire and beyond. Herbs from the Himalayas, roots from the southern forests, minerals from distant mountains. Ashoka has sent expeditions to gather healing substances from every corner of the known world, understanding that true Dharma requires not just good intentions, but practical resources to alleviate suffering. In the countryside, agricultural improvements reflect the same comprehensive approach to welfare. New irrigation canals bring water to previously barren lands. Improved storage facilities protect grain from spoilage, ensuring food security even in difficult years. Agricultural advisors travel from village to village, sharing knowledge about crop rotation, soil improvement, and pest control. Farmer Devaka, whose small plot near Ujjain has never produced enough to fully feed his family, watches in amazement as the new irrigation system transforms his fields. The emperor has given us the gift of abundance, he tells his wife as they survey their flourishing crops, not through conquest or tribute, but through wisdom and care. The economic impact of these improvements ripples throughout the empire. Better roads facilitate trade, leading to increased prosperity for merchants and artisans. Improved agriculture creates surplus food, which supports population growth and urbanization. The construction projects themselves provide employment for thousands of workers, from skilled engineers to common laborers. But perhaps most importantly, these practical improvements demonstrate to the people that their emperor's commitment to Dharma is not mere rhetoric. It is a lived reality that touches their daily lives in tangible ways. The wells provide clean water, the roads enable safe travel, the hospitals heal the sick, and the rest houses offer shelter to the weary. As evening falls over the village of Sarnath, the new well is finally complete. Clear, sweet water bubbles up from the depths, and the villagers gather in celebration. Children who have never had easy access to clean water splash and play. Women who have spent hours each day walking to distant water sources smile with relief and gratitude. Elder Gautama draws the first ceremonial bucket of water and offers it to the work crew. "This gift will serve our children and our children's children," he says solemnly. "Long after we are gone, they will drink from this well and remember that there was once an emperor who cared more for their welfare than for his own glory." The infrastructure of compassion is taking shape across the empire, one well, one road, one hospital at a time. Ashoka's vision of dharmic governance is becoming a reality that improves millions of lives in practical, measurable ways. The emperor who once measured his success in conquered territories now measures it in wells dug, roads built, and lives made better. This is Dharma in action, not as abstract philosophy, but as concrete care for the welfare of all beings. Respect for life. In the forests of Shergar, where tigers once feared the approach of royal hunting parties, a different kind of imperial procession moves quietly through the dappled sunlight. Emperor Ashoka walks on foot, accompanied only by a small group of advisors and Buddhist monks, observing the wildlife sanctuary he has established in what was once his private hunting preserve. A magnificent peacock struts across the path ahead of them, its brilliant plumage catching the light as it calls to its mate. In the old days, such a bird might have been captured for the royal menagerie or killed for its beautiful feathers. Now it lives in perfect freedom, protected by imperial decree from any harm. "Your Majesty," whispers Moggallana, one of the monks accompanying the emperor, "observe how the animals here show no fear of humans. They sense that this is a place of safety." Indeed, the transformation is remarkable. Deer graze peacefully within sight of the human visitors. Monkeys chatter in the trees above without fleeing. Even a family of wild boar continues rooting for food nearby, their usual wariness replaced by calm acceptance of the human presence. This sanctuary is just one of many that Ashoka has established throughout his empire. Vast tracts of forest and grassland have been set aside where no hunting is permitted, where animals can live and breed without human interference. The emperor's commitment to ahimsa, non-violence toward all living beings, has found its practical expression in these protected spaces. But the respect for life extends far beyond the creation of wildlife sanctuaries. Throughout the empire, Ashoka has implemented policies that reflect his understanding that Dharma must encompass all creatures, not just humans. In the royal kitchens of Pataliputra, a revolution has taken place. Where once hundreds of animals were slaughtered daily to feed the court, now elaborate vegetarian meals are prepared with the same skill and artistry once devoted to meat dishes. The head cook, initially skeptical of the change, has become an enthusiastic convert. "I thought that cooking without meat would limit my art," he confesses to a visiting dignitary. "Instead, I have discovered flavors and techniques I never knew existed." The emperor has not diminished our cuisine. He has enriched it. The imperial example has influenced eating habits throughout the empire. While Ashoka does not mandate vegetarianism for his subjects, his personal practice and gentle encouragement have led many to reduce their consumption of meat. Markets now feature expanded selections of vegetables, fruits, grains, and dairy products to meet the growing demand. Medical practice, too, has been transformed by the principle of ahimsa. The new hospitals established by Ashoka treat not only human patients but animals as well. Veterinary medicine, once limited to the care of valuable horses and elephants, now extends to all creatures that suffer. Dr. Javaka, the chief veterinarian at the Pataliputra Animal Hospital, tends to an injured street dog with the same care he once reserved for royal horses. "All beings feel pain," he explains to his students. "All beings deserve compassion. The emperor has taught us that true healing recognizes no distinction between human and animal suffering." The transformation extends even to agriculture. Farmers are encouraged to use methods that minimize harm to insects and small animals. New plowing techniques disturb the soil less dramatically, giving ground-dwelling creatures a chance to escape. Harvest schedules are adjusted to avoid the nesting seasons of birds that make their homes in grain fields. Raman, a farmer near Varanasi, has embraced these new methods enthusiastically. "At first, I worried that being gentler to the small creatures would reduce my harvest, he admits. But I have found the opposite to be true. When we work in harmony with nature rather than against it, the land itself becomes more generous. The emperor's respect for life has also led to the abolition of many traditional practices that caused animal suffering. Ritual animal sacrifices, once common in religious ceremonies, are now discouraged in favor of offerings of flowers, fruits, and grains. Gladiatorial contests featuring animals have been banned entirely. Perhaps most significantly, the death penalty for human criminals has been severely restricted. Ashoka believes that even those who have committed serious crimes retain the fundamental right to life. Instead of execution, the most severe punishment is now long-term imprisonment, with opportunities for rehabilitation and spiritual growth. Every being, the emperor declares in one of his edicts, has within it the potential for goodness. Our duty is not to destroy that potential, but to nurture it, even in those who have temporarily lost their way. As the royal party continues through the sanctuary, they encounter a group of former hunters who now work as forest guardians. These men, who once made their living by taking animal lives, have found new purpose in protecting the creatures they once pursued. Vikrama, a former hunter turned guardian, explains his transformation. When the emperor declared this sanctuary, I thought my livelihood was ended. But he offered us new work, to protect rather than destroy, to guard rather than hunt. I have found more satisfaction in saving one life than I ever found in taking many. The economic impact of these policies has been largely positive. The sanctuary system has created new forms of employment in forest management and wildlife protection. The reduced consumption of meat has stimulated innovation in agriculture and cooking. The emphasis on non-violence has reduced crime and social conflict. But beyond the practical benefits, Ashoka's respect for life has created something more precious. A culture of compassion that permeates all levels of society. Children grow up learning that all creatures deserve kindness. Adults find themselves more gentle in their daily interactions. The very atmosphere of the empire seems more peaceful, more harmonious. As the sun sets over the Shergar sanctuary, the sounds of the forest create a natural symphony. Bird calls, insect chirps, the rustle of small animals in the underbrush. It is the sound of life flourishing, of creatures living without fear, of nature in harmony with enlightened human stewardship. Emperor Ashoka stands quietly, listening to this music of protected life. In these sounds, he hears the fulfillment of dharma, the practical expression of compassion, the proof that power can be used not to dominate and destroy, but to nurture and protect. The respect for life has become the cornerstone of his transformed empire, creating a society where all beings can flourish in safety and peace. Reflection and peace. In the gardens of his palace at Pataliputra, Emperor Ashoka walks slowly among the flowering trees he has planted with his own hands. The morning mist clings to the lotus pond, and the air is filled with the gentle sounds of awakening life. At 62, his hair now white as the sacred threads worn by Brahmin priests, he moves with the measured pace of a man who has learned that wisdom often comes through stillness. These morning walks have become his most treasured ritual. Not the elaborate ceremonies of his earlier reign with their displays of imperial majesty, but these quiet moments of reflection when he can contemplate the transformation that has defined the second half of his life. The garden itself tells the story. Where once stood monuments to military victories, now grow medicinal plants that supply his hospitals. Where once exotic animals were caged for royal entertainment, now birds nest freely in trees planted for their benefit alone. Today, as on many mornings, he is joined by his daughter Sangamita, now a Buddhist nun whose wisdom has become one of his greatest sources of guidance. She walks beside him in comfortable silence, both of them understanding that the deepest conversations often happen without words. "Father," she says finally, her voice carrying the same gentleness that has come to characterize all discourse in this transformed court. "The merchants from Ceylon brought news yesterday. They say that in distant lands, people speak of the Mauryan Empire not with fear but with admiration. They wish to learn about Dharma, to understand how a kingdom can be governed through compassion." Ashoka nods slowly, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "It is strange, my daughter, how completely one's understanding of success can change. In my youth, I measured achievement by the fear I could inspire, the territories I could conquer, the enemies I could defeat. Now I find myself hoping to be remembered for the wells I have dug, the hospitals I have built, the lives I have been able to improve. They pause beside a small shrine dedicated to the memory of those who died in the Kalinga War. Ashoka established this memorial not to celebrate victory, but to honor the victims of his former ignorance. Fresh flowers are placed here daily, and oil lamps burn continuously in remembrance of lives cut short by imperial ambition. The emperor's daily routine reflects his transformed priorities. He rises before dawn for meditation, seeking the inner peace that must precede any attempt to create peace in the world. His morning audiences are devoted not to military briefings or territorial planning, but to reports from his Dharma Mahamatras about the welfare of his people. Tell me, he says to these officials, not how much tribute has been collected, but how much suffering has been alleviated. Show me not maps of conquest, but accounts of compassion in action. The transformation in palace life has been remarkable. The great halls that once echoed with the clash of weapons now host discussions of philosophy and ethics. The treasuries that once hoarded gold for military campaigns now fund public works projects. The scribes who once recorded battle plans now draft edicts promoting moral behavior and social welfare. Ashoka's personal relationships, too, have been transformed by his embrace of Dharma. His interactions with servants and officials are marked by genuine respect and concern for their well-being. He remembers the names of their children, inquires about their health, and ensures that their working conditions reflect the same principles of compassion he promotes throughout the empire. In the afternoon, the emperor often receives visitors from distant lands. Buddhist monks from Sri Lanka, Greek philosophers from Bactria, Jain teachers from Gujarat. These conversations, conducted in multiple languages with the help of skilled translators, have become a source of great joy for Ashoka. He delights in learning about different approaches to wisdom, different expressions of the universal truths he has discovered. Dharma, he tells a gathering of such visitors, is not the exclusive property of any one tradition. It is the common heritage of all who seek to live with compassion, honesty, and respect for life. In your diverse teachings, I hear the same fundamental message, that we are all connected, all responsible for each other's welfare, all capable of transcending our baser instincts through wisdom and love. The emperor's evenings are often spent in his private study, reading reports from across the empire. But these are not the military dispatches and tax records that once consumed his attention. Instead, he pores over accounts of dharmic progress, stories of former enemies who have become friends, of communities that have resolved conflicts through dialogue rather than violence, of individuals whose lives have been transformed by exposure to compassionate governance. One such report particularly moves him. It tells of a village in former Kalinga where the descendants of warriors who fought against his army have erected a statue in his honor, not celebrating his victory in battle, but commemorating his transformation afterward, his dedication to healing the wounds his conquest had inflicted. As the years have passed, Ashoka has also devoted increasing attention to ensuring that his dharmic reforms will outlast his own reign. He has established schools where future administrators learn not just the techniques of governance, but the principles of compassionate leadership. He has created institutions to preserve and propagate dharmic teachings, ensuring that the wisdom he has gained through such painful experience will not be lost. I am an old man now, he confides to Sangamita as they complete their morning walk, and I know that my time on this earth grows short, but I am no longer troubled by thoughts of legacy in the way I once was. If I am remembered at all, I hope it will be not as Ashoka the conqueror, but as Ashoka the servant, a man who learned, perhaps too late, that true greatness lies not in the power to destroy, but in the commitment to heal. The garden around them seems to respond to these words. Butterflies dance among the flowers he has planted, birds sing in the trees he has protected, and the gentle sound of the fountain he built for the simple pleasure of bringing beauty into the world creates a natural music of peace. In this tranquil setting, surrounded by the fruits of his transformed understanding, Emperor Ashoka embodies the profound truth he has discovered, that the greatest victories are won not on battlefields, but in the human heart, and that the most lasting empires are built not on conquest, but on compassion. The reflection continues, the peace deepens, and the legacy of Dharma grows stronger with each passing day. A legacy of Dharma. The sun sets golden over the vast expanse of the Mauryan Empire, painting the sky in shades of saffron and rose. From the snow-capped peaks of the Hindu Kush to the palm-fringed shores of the Arabian Sea, from the dense forests of the Deccan to the fertile plains of the Ganges, a remarkable transformation has taken root and flourished. In villages across this immense realm, the evening routines tell the story of Ashoka's legacy. Farmers return from fields irrigated by imperial canals, their harvests more abundant than their fathers ever dreamed possible. Merchants close shops stocked with goods that traveled safely along roads protected by dharmic law rather than military might. Children play games in squares built around wells that provide clean water to all, regardless of caste or wealth. The transformation is visible everywhere you might look. In Taxila, the great university attracts students from across the known world, drawn not by the promise of military training or political advancement, but by the opportunity to study philosophy, medicine, and the arts of peaceful governance. The lecture halls echo with discussions of ethics rather than strategy, of compassion rather than conquest. Professor Kautilya the Younger, grandson of the famous political theorist, addresses his students with words that would have been unthinkable in his grandfather's time. True statecraft, he explains, is not the art of acquiring power over others, but the science of creating conditions where all beings can flourish. The greatest ruler is not the one who is most feared, but the one who is most loved. In the great port city of Baruch, ships arrive daily carrying not just goods for trade, but visitors eager to witness the miracle of dharmic governance. Envoys from distant kingdoms come to study Ashoka's methods, hoping to implement similar reforms in their own lands. Greek merchants write letters home describing a society where justice is tempered with mercy, where strength is measured by protection rather than domination. The economic prosperity that has followed Ashoka's reforms is evident in every market town. Trade flourishes when merchants can trust imperial weights and measures, when contracts are enforced fairly, when corruption has been largely eliminated by officials chosen for their integrity rather than their connections. The empire's wealth has grown not through conquest and tribute, but through honest commerce and productive labor. But perhaps most remarkably, the social fabric of the empire has been rewoven with threads of mutual respect and understanding. Religious communities that once viewed each other with suspicion now collaborate on public projects. Hindu temples and Buddhist monasteries stand side by side, their festivals celebrated by people of all faiths. Jain merchants fund hospitals that serve patients regardless of their religious beliefs. In the great cathedral city of Varanasi, this harmony is particularly evident. The Ghats along the sacred Ganges host pilgrims from every tradition, all finding welcome and respect. The evening Aarti ceremony, with its thousands of flickering oil lamps reflected in the holy river, has become a celebration not just of Hindu devotion, but of the universal human longing for the divine. The cultural renaissance, sparked by dharmic governance, has produced art, literature, and architecture of unprecedented beauty. Sculptors create works that celebrate not military victories, but the triumph of compassion over cruelty. Poets compose verses that speak of love rather than conquest. The great stupas being built across the empire stand as monuments not to imperial ego, but to the possibility of human transformation. In the remote mountain kingdom of Gandhara, where Greek and Indian cultures blend in fascinating synthesis, the local king has adopted many of Ashoka's reforms. We have seen, he writes in a letter to the emperor, that a kingdom governed by Dharma is not weak but strong in ways we never imagined. Our people are more prosperous, more peaceful, more genuinely loyal than ever before. Similar reports arrive from kingdoms throughout the known world. Rulers in Ceylon, Burma, and even distant China express interest in dharmic principles. The edicts of Ashoka, translated into dozens of languages, are studied in royal courts from Alexandria to Samarkand. The emperor's commitment to non-violence has had particularly far-reaching effects. The great armies that once consumed vast resources in endless campaigns have been largely converted to public works forces. Former soldiers now build roads, dig wells, and construct hospitals. The military budget has been redirected to fund schools, libraries, and medical research. General Pushyamitra, once one of Ashoka's most trusted military commanders, now oversees the empire's disaster relief efforts. I have found more satisfaction, he reflects, in saving lives during floods and famines than I ever found in taking them on battlefields. The emperor has shown us that true courage lies not in the willingness to kill, but in the commitment to heal. As darkness falls over the empire, oil lamps begin to twinkle in windows from the Indus to the Brahmaputra. Each light represents a family whose life has been touched by dharmic governance. The widow whose children attend school built with imperial funds. The farmer whose crops are watered by canals dug by imperial engineers. The merchant whose goods travel safely on roads patrolled by officials committed to justice rather than personal gain. In the great library of Pataliputra, scholars work by lamplight to preserve and propagate the teachings that have transformed their world. They copy texts on palm leaves and parchment, ensuring that the wisdom gained through Ashoka's transformation will be available to future generations. The library has become a beacon of learning, attracting students and teachers from across the civilized world. The empire sleeps peacefully tonight, secure in the knowledge that its ruler governs not through fear, but through love. Children drift off to dreams untroubled by nightmares of war. Parents rest easy, knowing that justice will be fairly administered. Even the animals in Ashoka's sanctuaries sleep safely, protected by laws that recognize their right to exist without human interference. This is the legacy of Dharma made manifest, not an empire held together by force, but a civilization bound by shared values of compassion, justice, and respect for all life. It is a vision of what human society can become when power is guided by wisdom, when strength serves compassion, when the highest aspiration of governance is the welfare of all beings. The golden age of Dharma reaches its zenith, and its light will continue to shine through the centuries, inspiring countless generations to believe that a better world is not just possible, but inevitable when human hearts choose love over hatred, peace over war, dharma over domination. And final thoughts, and so we come to the end of our journey with Ashoka. From the ambitious young emperor who measured his worth in conquered territories to the wise old king who found his greatest satisfaction in the wells he dug and the hospitals he built. Perhaps as you lie here in the quiet of your own evening, you can feel the weight of your own ambitions, the territories you seek to conquer, the victories you hope to achieve, the empire you are building in your chosen field. There is nothing wrong with ambition. Ashoka's story does not ask us to abandon our dreams, but rather to examine the true nature of success. The young emperor believed that greatness came from dominance, from the ability to impose his will upon others, to expand his influence, to be feared and respected for his power. And indeed, he achieved all of this. The Mauryan Empire under his rule was the largest and most powerful the ancient world had ever seen. But in that tent beside the battlefield of Kalinga, staring at maps that showed his expanded dominions, Ashoka discovered something that all the military victories could not provide: inner peace. The conquest that brought him the most territory brought him the least satisfaction. The victory that completed his empire left him feeling empty and lost. The transformation that followed was not a rejection of power, but a redefinition of it. Ashoka learned that true strength lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the commitment to create. Not in the capacity to instill fear, but in the skill to inspire love. Not in the accumulation of territories, but in the cultivation of wisdom. This is perhaps the most profound lesson of his remarkable life, that our greatest achievements often come not from getting what we want, but from transforming what we want. The emperor who began by seeking to conquer the world ended by seeking to serve it. The principles of Dharma that guided Ashoka's transformation are not complex or esoteric. Compassion for all beings, truthfulness in speech and action, generosity toward those in need, respect for different beliefs and traditions, the recognition that we are all connected, all responsible for each other's welfare. These are simple truths, but living them requires the kind of courage that Ashoka discovered, the courage to admit when we have been wrong, to change course when we recognize a better path, to measure our success not by what we have accumulated, but by what we have contributed. In your own life, in your own work, in your own relationships, the choice that faced Ashoka faces you as well. Will you seek to build through domination or through service? Will you measure your success by the fear you inspire or the love you generate? Will you leave behind monuments to your ego or contributions to the common good? The empire Ashoka built through conquest lasted only a few generations, but the empire he built through dharma has endured for over 2,000 years. His edicts are still read, his hospitals still inspire modern healthcare systems, his commitment to religious tolerance still guides pluralistic societies. This is the true measure of a life well lived, not the temporary accumulation of power or wealth, but the lasting contribution to human flourishing. Not the ability to get what we want from the world, but the wisdom to give what the world needs from us. As you rest now, let Ashoka's story remind you that transformation is always possible, that our greatest mistakes can become our most profound teachers, that our deepest wounds can become sources of healing for others, that our most painful experiences can lead to our most meaningful contributions. The path of Dharma is not always easy, but it is always available. In every moment, in every decision, in every interaction with another human being, we have the opportunity to choose compassion over cruelty, understanding over judgment, service over selfishness. Sleep now, knowing that tomorrow brings new opportunities to build your own legacy of Dharma, to dig your own wells of kindness, to construct your own hospitals of healing, to plant your own trees of wisdom that will provide shade for generations yet to come. The empire you are building matters, but let it be an empire of love, guided by wisdom, sustained by compassion, and dedicated to the welfare of all beings. Rest well, and may your dreams be filled with the peace that comes from knowing that true greatness lies not in what we conquer, but in what we give. This has been the Sleepless Founder, wishing you the rest that leads to wisdom and the wisdom that leads to peace.